I was pouring my morning coffee when I saw the letter. Violation notice, unapproved fence structure. Slapped right on my gate by the homeowners association, printed on thick paper like it meant something. That fence they were crying about? It was nothing fancy. Just a solid, well-built wooden boundary to keep my goats from wandering onto the nearby road, a road they barely maintain, by the way. I didn't buy the wood. I cut and shaped it myself from fallen timber on my own property. It blended into the land. It did its job. But according to the HOA's little handbook, the one I never signed, it didn't match the community aesthetic. Whatever that means. So they hit me with a fine. $1,200. And a 30-day warning to tear it down. I stared at the paper, then looked out at my land. 40 acres. Trees. Open sky. A creek on the south side. And goats, just doing goat things, minding their business. I'd lived on that land for years. Long before the subdivision popped up on the northern boundary. Back when the road was gravel, and folks waved when they passed by. The HOA didn't exist back then. It came later, brought in by the influx of modern ranch-style homes with matching mailboxes, solar-powered driveway lamps, and neighbors who complain if your grass gets too wild. Somehow, those newcomers got together, formed a committee, and expanded their authority into areas that were never part of their original jurisdiction. My land? Annexed without my consent. A technicality. A clause buried in some county-level redistricting vote that nobody paid attention to. And now, they thought they could boss me around. The thing about folks like that, HOA board members, is they love order. They love rules. They love bullet points, uniformity, structure. They're the kind of people who lose sleep if your mailbox is tilted 5 degrees. But what they don't understand is land. Real land. The kind you work on, bleed on, build on with your own hands. The kind that kicks back when disrespected. So I walked out to the fence. Ran my hand along the wood. Solid. Clean. Honest. Not flashy. Not plastic-coated. It belonged there, unlike that HOA president's decorative rock garden she imported from California. I took a photo of the violation letter and pinned it to the fence for the goats to chew on. Figured it was the most useful thing that paper could do. Over the next few days, I did my research. Read every line of their bylaws. Every zoning map. Every clause in the property ordinances they thought gave them leverage. What I found didn't just frustrate me, it lit a fire. They had overstepped. And I wasn't just going to ignore them. I was going to answer. This wasn't about offense anymore. It was about principle. About standing your ground when city rules try to choke country life. About drawing a line and saying, this is mine. I built it. You don't get to tell me how to exist on my own land. The HOA thought they were sending me a message. They were. And my response was coming, just not in the language they expected. I showed up to the next HOA meeting, boots dusty and hat in hand. Not as a rebel, not looking for a fight, just a man trying to reason. Thought maybe, just maybe, they'd listen. The meeting was held in the community center. Beige walls, fake plants, water cooler humming in the corner. They sat up front behind a fold-up plastic table, like a mini courtroom, 5 board members who had probably never dug a post hole or fixed a fence wire in their lives. They wore polished shoes, collared shirts, stainless steel tumblers in front of them like trophies of bureaucracy. I stood before them and laid it out plain. The fence was for livestock safety. Goats don't understand property lines. They go where grass grows. That fence keeps them from wandering into the road, or worse, someone else's property, where I'd be the one footing the bill for damage. I told them I used natural timber for my land. That it wasn't neon pink or barbed wire or some rusty patchwork disaster. It was just a fence. A clean, honest fence. Still, I was willing to compromise. I told them I'd stain the wood, plant some native shrubs, even put up a decorative gate if they were really worried about aesthetic harmony. They didn't care. One board member, young guy, no calluses, probably sells insurance, leaned forward with a smirk and said, "This community has standards. If we make an exception for one wooden fence, we'll have barns popping up next." The others chuckled quietly, nodding along. No vote. No discussion. Just a cold dismissal. My appeal? Denied. I could feel it, not just the disrespect, but the smugness that comes when people believe their clipboard and rules give them dominion over everyone else. It wasn't about offense to them. It was about reminding me who was in charge. And that's when it hit me. They didn't want cooperation. They didn't want a solution. They wanted submission. They wanted to make an example out of me, the stubborn rancher who wouldn't fall in line. They wanted to prove that their paperwork held more power than decades of sweat and ownership. I stood there in silence for a few seconds. Took a deep breath. Then I tipped my hat, turned around, and walked out the door without another word. Outside, the sun was setting low behind the hills. I looked up at the sky, quiet, calm, mine, and whispered, "All right then. If it was going to be a war, so be it." I wasn't about to let a board full of suburban bureaucrats who couldn't tell the difference between cedar and cypress dictate what I could or couldn't build on my land. They thought they were untouchable behind their bylaws and technicalities. But what they didn't know was that I knew this land, legally, historically, and practically, better than they ever would. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about drawing the line, literally and figuratively. If they wanted to play games with rules, I was ready to play. And I had something they didn't: land, law, and time. Let the games begin. I stayed up late that night. Not pacing, not ranting, not loading a shotgun like in some backwoods revenge story. No, I sat down at my kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, a notepad, and a stack of zoning maps and county records I downloaded from the registrar's online database. If the HOA wanted to play games with rules, I'd play on their field, but I'd play smarter. Hours passed as I dug through property lines, annexation files, land use permits, the kind of stuff most folks ignore unless a bulldozer shows up next door. But I've lived here long enough to know the law don't just sit in courtrooms, it hides in fine print and forgotten pages. And that's when I found it. My land, all 40 acres of it, was still officially zoned agricultural and mixed use. That meant I could run livestock, build fencing, operate small-scale farming operations, and even open an agricultural retail stand if I felt like selling goat cheese someday. But what caught my eye wasn't my land. It was theirs. The HOA's prized greenbelt, a narrow strip of grass and walking trails they used for jogging, yoga, dog walking, and smug little Sunday BBQs, sat on a neglected parcel that, decades ago, had been zoned low-grade livestock overflow. Back then, before the new houses went up, that land was part of a larger ranch. It had been subdivided, carved up, paved over, but the zoning hadn't been fully updated. Now here's the kicker. According to County Agricultural Code 11.3, if a landowner of an adjoining agricultural parcel submits a formal request, they can reactivate dormant zoning use on adjacent land, especially if that use serves the original intent of the surrounding area. In simpler terms, if I told the county I needed overflow space for livestock, and the zoning technically allowed it, they had to consider it. And nowhere in that policy did it say the HOA's opinion mattered. No signatures from them. No approval from a committee. No veto power. So I filed the petition the very next morning. It wasn't dramatic. Just some typed forms, a map, a justification statement, and a filing fee. I stated I needed backup pasture space in dry months and rotational grazing room. All of it factual. All of it legal. Nothing aggressive. Nothing vengeful, just rural management policy at work. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, I got the county's letter. Approved. The zoning had been officially reactivated. The HOA's manicured little dog park? Legally recognized now as livestock-compatible land. They could hold yoga sessions if they wanted, but I could also send in the goats to mow the place down naturally. I sat back in my chair, folded the letter, and whistled to myself. This wasn't just payback. This was a reminder that real power doesn't come from clipboards or community newsletters. It comes from knowing the land, reading the law, and having the patience to do what others won't. The HOA had tried to push me into a corner with their rules. But they forgot one thing: out here, we read between the lines. And sometimes, we rewrite the whole pag.
It all started when Karen, the relentless HOA enforcer, decided to take matters into her own hands and repeatedly vandalize my fence. I had spent months building it, trying to add some privacy and security to my property, only for her to tear it down every time I fixed it. I'd received multiple letters from the HOA accusing me of violating community aesthetics despite having followed all the guidelines. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She just kept showing up to complain, even going so far as to damage the fence herself. After the 5th time she tore down my fence, I reached my limit. I didn't want to escalate things with her directly, but I wasn't about to let her win. So I came up with a plan. I decided to replace my wooden fence with something she couldn't easily destroy: steel spikes. I figured if she didn't want to respect my property, I'd give her something to truly respect. The next day, I went to the hardware store, picked up enough steel spikes to line the entire perimeter, and got to work. I built the new fence strong enough that not even Karen's destructive tendencies could touch it. When I finally finished, it looked both intimidating and durable. It sent a clear message that I wasn't messing around. Sure enough, Karen showed up the very next day, and when she saw the steel spikes, she froze. She realized that whatever complaints she had, she wouldn't be tearing down this fence anytime soon. I never heard another word from her after that. Sometimes, standing your ground in a way people can't ignore is the only way to make them back off.